Assalamu alaikum. My name is Rela Tarauna in CNBC Arabia TV. We are specialized in talking about businesses and economy, but the needs, in the needs of the world's crisis, now for more than 24 months. We cannot, forget what's happening in the world from crisis. Please use headsets. So economy, is connected with politics and security and geopolitical tensions. We are not away from what's happening in the world, from crisis, wars, and without connection to economy. So in CNBC in the world, when we are talking about the markets, and now we are talking about what's happening and what the countries are suffering. Now, I'm going to talk about the session that has talked about, which was from crisis to capability, pathways to displacement and recovery. And for coincidence, I had yesterday one episode talking about what's happening in the world. For example, what's happening in winter. I'd like to make sure, Dr. Khalid, do you hear me? And this has pushed me to talk about some statistics. Crises are happening in. We have a lot of victims of crises, disasters, and humanitarian disasters, economic crisis, pushing the world and the human being to leave and to be displaced his country and his school and his work. And displacement is very difficult word. And now without social media of today, we are not going to see what's happening in the boats of immigrants from the beginning of the crisis in Syria, and the victims who needed to sacrifice their children to achieve their stability. Displacement from the country, inside of the country, internal displacement is a big problem today when we are talking about these crises. First of all, we are looking at the United Nations and humanitarian affairs, so that the response at the beginning of the first 24 hours, what's happening, who's going to receive those displaced people, who can provide them with their requirements, providing with the foods, medicine, and now the tents in winters. So some countries are not ready to welcome them. Today we are going to talk about what we have lived in, and what the Generation Z, which has been accused of just only looking at social media. So they have looked at everything. They suffered from these affairs. But our generation, of course, didn't suffer from these. What we have received from the social and from the media, so that we are looking for inspiration, how we can create this recovery. Let me welcome the speakers in this session. We start with Mrs. Olga. She is the regional manager of the volunteers in the United Nations. Sajid Al Shawa for humanitarian coordination in the United Arab Emirates for Unite. Mohammed Hadi Bashir, is a strategic initiative coordinator, and Dr. Khalid Khalifa, first representative for the commissioner in UNHCR for in the United Arab Emirates in the Gulf region. Let me start, and let me take my seat next to you and be moderating this session. I'm going to have exception to we are the Arab starts from the right to the left, but today since this subject, what's happening? First, what's happening? We see the displaced people. We need to look at the response plans. Dr. Khalid Khalifa, the first 24 hours, is it the most important in the process of taking care of those displaced? At the beginning, thank you so much, Rula, and I am honored. It's a very important question at the beginning of the response to 24 hours. 24 hours of from of the crisis. Always we focus at. Okay, we don't know if this is a natural disaster. We are talking about rescue and the coordination between the responders, and this is really important point when the disaster or crisis happens. We have a lot of teams from countries and volunteers and non NGOs. Always there's a chaos. The governments have an impact on the government, and maybe they are not have the ability to coordinate, and the governments maybe in they are in emergencies. We see assistance and aids coming from the different countries, maybe in maybe some assistance. Okay, maybe it's required, maybe it's not required. Maybe the team sometimes may create problems more than the problem that we have. So the first 24 hours, the response is supposed to be briefed. And for this question, always we have to focus on coordination mechanisms, in fact, and building the communication channels with the national authorities, and to provide the assistance for the direct life that the, those those impacted people. Dr. Muhammad, what your role is in implementing economic modeling. This is what maybe next step, not only the first step after with displacement. Maybe after a while, okay, of the crisis, you are studying the impact of the wars and the casualties. If we look today at the last 2 years, what are the the most prominent disaster we have faced? Thank you so much for responding me. Before we start, I'd like to remind you. I'd like to remind you that the Arab world is the 5% of the world, the population in the world. 4 to 5 per population in the world. 31% of the violent events, okay, in wars, it's in the Arab world. 30% of the refugees and internal displaced in the Arab world. 34% of the refugees, the external refugees, are in the world, in the Arab world. So that the impact of these wars is very severe. So we are not talking about just only economic Arabic economy without interfering with these issues. Well, and as the doctor said, okay, the first days, okay, we have mistakes, okay, can be committed. We cannot ignore, we cannot avoid, as for example, such as mistaken planning, wrong planning, uncover the impact and scenarios of recovery before the initiatives of recovery. In the United Nations, especially in UNDP, we have tried. Unfortunately, in the Arab office, 90% of our work is just to identify scenarios of the wars, scenarios of the recovery, and the impact of the wars on economy and the communities. For example, if we look at when the war started in Gaza, we have started to modeling scenarios. Okay, we it was the most catastrophic scenario. We said 6 months, okay, just only, and a lot of people were pessimistic. What is this pessimism? And this is now we are talking about a very important phenomenon which is implication, a prediction. Some countries were used to give about the budget once a year, but what's happening right now in the world? This is pushing me to ask Mrs. Sajida before we get to. We don't want the step that we cannot get back through. First happening when we have a humanitarian crisis, and everyone shares me. If we are talking about wars, if we are talking about wars, I'd like to donate. What type of donation do I have to do? How do you coordinate? How do you track this coordination? Thank you so much, Rola. I'm happy being here. And happy to be with colleagues, okay, specialized in humanitarian affairs. For continuity of this discussion, when at the beginning of any war we have crisis, we have disasters, we need to distinguish between a crisis by man-made or natural disasters. So scenarios are different, but as Dr. Khalid talked about, the coordination of a new NDP is the first to try to establish channels between all of the entities, maybe the belligerents and the opposition, so that we need organizations to be in charge of every sector. It depends on health. All of these are requirements in the humanitarian and especially urgent requirements. Since we have these foundational processes, we start to have reports and we have knowledge of information, production of information when we talk about the real requirements, who's on the ground, who are the partners, how many the numbers, how many people are there, what is the financial coordination, so that when we have we need to know what are the requirements at the beginning, Mrs. Sajida, at the beginning of crisis, at the beginning of the displacement, we need to know who is going to be in charge of knowing the requirements. We have of course, we have specialized teams, and we have the coordination offices, Peru. They are the first to arrive and to try to find out, okay, the requirements. Sometimes maybe there's few and search teams, and Dr. Khalid mentioned about, so we have also the neighboring countries, government of the neighboring countries in the first 24 hours, and we start producing reports what are the requirements, and we have to go to the donation entities. So what are the resources, financial resources, and the financial pool funds? so that you are nearly like emergency in the hospital. I'd like to ask everyone here, how many of you made volunteering work in his life at school and the community? Mrs. Olga, she is specialized in the volunteering work. What is the difficult, okay, you have sent volunteers, Mrs. Olga? And
Acknowledge also in honor to be here with my colleagues and with all of you. And yes, to come to the previous point, when the disasters happen and hit, who comes first? Most of the time, the strength comes within communities, and it comes from the volunteers, from the communities. And most of the time, the volunteers focus on the most vulnerable to support children, women, people with disabilities, and most likely get them out of the area or ensure then that they have enough of necessities, especially food, water, and any items that will be required during the disaster. There are plenty of difficulties. However, I would like to stress the point that volunteers are innovators and change makers. So when there is a problem, we can always rely on people, such volunteers, to come up with ideas how to get over those situations. Uh, in our organization, the UN Volunteers Organization, we have volunteers in 20 countries in the region, and our top priority is actually 5 crisis countries, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Sudan, Yemen, and of course we monitor the situation in all neighboring countries. And I can tell you our volunteers do whatever is needed. Either they support the communities on the ground with delivery of essential items, or they monitor media for humanitarian situations and gather latest information where the points and the geographical areas that require support. Like, for example, in Gaza, our volunteers are surveying right now the whole distracted, destroyed areas in Gaza and
ماذا يفعلون
capturing.
سيدة أوليغا في
Yes,
غزة؟ ماذا يفعلون؟
sorry.
what they what they are doing, what the tasks that they are doing.
So they're using the modern technology. I think we have around 61 online volunteers and around 20 other volunteers working in UNDP programs, actually focusing on the reconstruction of Gaza. They are creating maps of destroyed landscape, and then they submit this information for prioritization of reconstruction efforts. It's just the beginning because you know the situation, but it could be scaled up and replicated.
جميل جدا. هنالك الكثير من المواضيع متشوقة جدا للحديث فيها بهذا المجال. دكتور خالد، اليوم
Dr. Khaled, and now you are designing and you're insisting on innovating the new things. Why we don't have disaster funds? Okay, some insurance companies they are making, they are producing, but now you are talking about zakah for the refugees. Where from you get the funding? Thank you so much, مرة أخرى. Once again, Rula, I'd like we have to ask who is in charge of response to the disaster. The first responder is the government. The responders, the governments, recent governments, national governments, who are going to respond first. First responders, the communities, United Nations, and the community. If the government, national government, is not able or is not cooperative, or maybe they are not desiring to respond, so that we need to domesticate the humanitarian response and develop the capabilities of the countries So the fund of the refugees, the fund for refugees, is a very important point in the work of the UND of UNHCR. Also, most of the United Nations organizations. We have started in this international system. It was a revolution how those international organizations are working in humanitarian affairs. When we started in 2017, it wasn't well welcomed. And we have arrived to this chaos environment. We decided to implement Zakah fund compatible with the Sharia. Okay, since 5 years, so that now we have 300 million, 300 million dollars. People are receiving in 33 countries. The most important out of these numbers, we opened the door for other organizations to get into this field, and we have the concepts, which misunderstood in the past, like for example fatwa, or compatible with Sharia. Okay, these concepts were not familiar for the international community. Now they are using in all of the reports of the United Nations by Muslims or non-Muslims, and we have started in this field to expand for another project with this Islamic Bank of Development. So Sukuk project, it was a predominant project. We are going to talk about this issue because we are covering. We don't know why we are reducing the funding for these organizations when we are talking about recovery, and we have contained the displaced. Today, if I gave you everyday assistance, but I need to make you in a sustainable recovery. What are the programs and studies in this field? In fact, in fact, in fact, as I have said already, the first decisions taken in the first period of recovery, it's really important for development in this country, in the concerned country. What I mean here, I'm talking about the planning for recovery. Okay, which is very important and crucial to have such planning, and the mistakes, the wrong sides are very leading to disasters. So after the post-conflicts, when we see like Bosnia and Herzegovina, and like Rwanda, and even China and Japan after the Second World War, we're able to develop and grow with 5% in addition. For example, in Bosnia, in the last 10 years after the war, 13%. What the difference between the countries? We are able to develop and grow 15%, 13%, and other countries like Arab countries or in African countries. What's happening? So the most important is planning. The cause of lack of this, how we are talking about the rebuilding of Bosnia and the ownership by the government, like the doctor said. So the government supposed to be the driving entity. We have depended on the predictions and selection of the sectors and ownership, domestication of the work. Let's take Palestine for example. The same amount of money, $400 million. If we have taken as assistance only, or I transferred to investments. Okay, these assistants, let's talk about the graphics. The same amount. If we tried to transfer this amount to investments, okay, which is a planned investments for 10 years, it will get back to the level of what is pre-war. Money is important, but planning is most important. Okay, so if we talked about, for example, in Tunisia, when we are talking about the capability to plan.
تطرق الدكتور خالد لموضوع مهم جدا وكونكم تعملون
Ms. Sajida, so Dr. Muhammad has touched upon important points, and since you work in the same, let's say, domain, and unfortunately, a lot of countries withdrew from providing relief and supplies, and on top of them, the United States, and I don't know why. That's why the organization was forced to actually do some downsizing and so tell us about the reduction of spending and financing. How will this affect or impact your work, because you are in need for every single penny, let's say, for this. So we cannot, for example, take something from the dedicated to the Syrian crisis to another crisis. Let's say that we have about 23 global crises around the world. So according to the Global Humanitarian Relief Report, there are millions of people that are in need. Just basic needs, those that are essential for survival. We are not talking about education or other things. We are talking about people who are in camps, who need some food, shelter, like the photos we see a lot and the videos in the news. So what you are talking about is policing humanitarian works and intervention with the financing and the conflict of global agendas, political agendas, unfortunately are impacting our work. So the first step we have taken is to reconsider the number of people that are in need for this assistance, and under the supervision of the coordinator council, which is a representative of global organizations, and in aligned with different agencies around the world, to reconsider the number of people that are in need for help, not because we want to do further studies, but because we know the numbers. We know that the numbers have been reduced, so we have cut down the number to 190 million. You can imagine that those people are not left behind, but amidst all these circumstances we are trying to prioritize with huge difficulty, because it's very important to say that those displaced are more important than those, etc. So it's a matter of resources and funding. Just as we see in the news, officials are trying to look at things from another innovative perspective, that how the private sector can contribute to this, not just in terms of funding, but in terms of existence on the ground. Like, for example, conflicts related to climate change, like the typhoon we have seen recently. So private sectors can actually work side by side with UN organizations and with the global organizations in terms of their capabilities, and local organizations and local communities. All of these are an essential part of this. And finally, we have technology, because we don't have the business as usual model. We have technology-based business models. So we have data centers that gather information about all the populations around the world, so that we know where people are in need and how to predict those crises also in advance, to be proactive rather than reactive. to integrate technology to provide cash assistance on the ground, etc. But the main part remains in integrating technology, and that helps us in information management. Ms. Olga, when I prepare, I always refer back to indicators um, and indexes. In the past, we couldn't have imagined that there will be a happiness index, well-being index, etc. What have you innovated in this domain? Can we say something?
Ruwa, it's a secret.
أرجوك.
However, only for this audience, but not to be spread outside of this
Of
audience.
course.
The UN Volunteers Program is working on its next State of the World Volunteerism Report, which will be released on 5th of December 2025, which is the International Day of Volunteering and Volunteers. And so in that report, we will be releasing the Global Volunteer Engagement Index. So it's coming up. And the index will have 4 dimensions. The first one is about impact that volunteering and volunteers bring to the society. The second impact is about economic value of volunteering. So you can imagine if volunteers are not there, who should be engaged and what will be the cost of that volunteering work, right? The third dimensional parameter is about the environment for volunteering. Do we have required policies? Do our volunteers get any remuneration, like reimbursement of their costs when they come to volunteer, transportation costs, for example? And the final one is about what volunteering does to a volunteer, or volunteers. So, what skills they obtain, how it will influence their employability, their future. So, it's coming up.
جميل جدا. لكن قبل أن أنتقل
This is wonderful, but before we proceed, are there some qualifications, conditions, or requirements that are required for the volunteers to have, like physical abilities, educational background? Do you do a background check, etc.?
You know, for the UN Volunteers Program, the requirement is to be 18 years old. We do have community volunteers. For that, you don't need to have any education. We actually now working more and more for engaging people with disabilities on UN volunteer contracts. We don't have any requirements than that, 18 years old, you know. But I want to tell you that in the UN Volunteers Program, we engage people from 18 to 80 years old. And we do have plenty of volunteers. We call them silver volunteers.
أكيد. دكتور خليفة، خليني أرجع وأتحدث اليوم عن التعافي.
Dr. Khalifa, let me get back and talk about recovery. Mr. Mohammed has said that we have seen the comparison. Some countries managed to achieve 13% of recovery and growth, while other countries have not. Let's talk about political stability. Political stability is an essential factor in this. Dr. Khalid, today Syria is different from what it was before. Everybody is shaking hands with Syria, is reaching to Syria and trying to have access, and they are trying to remove the Caesar's sanctions law. This is a very important question, and it continues what Mr. Mohammed has said, that in the Arab region, if there is a fair share, or what we call a fair share of crisis, so Syria has actually taken more than enough of its share, and way more fair. Even if we apply this to the Islamic world, we can say that the Islamic world constitutes about 25% of the global population, and it has like more than 50% of the global crises. Oh, you made me pessimistic, optimistic, I don't know. We will give the opportunity for the audience to have any questions or interventions. And there are some areas for hope, and Syria is among those countries. What is happening in Syria right now is a beacon of hope that one day those who were displaced will be back home. We are talking about 3 million Syrians who are displaced externally, and they will come voluntarily. Yes, voluntarily. And 2 million internally displaced people who have already started to go back to their towns and cities. And this is what Mr. Muhammad was talking about in terms of investment. If we focus only on assistance and how we can supply the needs for the people to get back to their country, to Syria, rather than Syria's capability to welcome those people and integrate them in the market. This is more important because those people contribute to creating the job market. Now Syria really has a beacon of hope, and the international community must actually seize this opportunity. We always talk about the necessity of the return of the displaced to their countries, and to avoid politicizing things more than needed. In the past, we used to hear a lot of these words that let's get back people back to their countries. When we talk about Afghanistan, for example, we were talking about 2 million refugees and displaced people from Iraq and other countries. So these people are part of empowering the investment and economy of those countries, especially when we meet the things that are in demand. Dr. Muhammad, I don't want just to focus on obstacles and barriers and the crises. How can I invest in a post-war country that has, let's say, somehow established political stability, but still faces global sanctions? So how can I attract investors and convince them to invest money and contribute to the infrastructure? And I have, while I have global sanctions, are there indexes? For example, let's be frank and honest. Let's talk about corruption index. We know that Syria was suffering a lot from this. Planning, I come back to recovery planning. This is a very, very important point. In addition to combating corruption, let's take Syria as an example. If nothing, if nothing has changed in Syria, Syria indeed needs 80 years just to get back to how it was before the war, how it was pre-war. So there is a difference. There is a difference between post-war and pre-war. The war has lasted for 10 years, for example, or 10 years plus, but for recovery needs like 5 times extra that period. So we are talking about reforms, internal reforms like productivity, new laws, etc. When we're talking about external things, or we are talking about attracting investments, and it also needs to drive investments towards specific industries or sectors, not all of them. Let's, doctor, talk about Lebanon also. We have a lot of internal displacement from south to north, etc., and a lot of communities and organizations actually provided support and relief to Lebanon, but nobody trusts the government now that they will dedicate those supplies to the people in need. Let's talk about the indexes, because action should actually align with all of these moves. In countries that usually have some conflict, the most important thing is that there should be accountability for to pave the way for success, because it's an important factor for success. I should know the objectives I have as a government, and there should be an annual monitoring for all of these. So here we're talking about an independence of judicial authorities as well. Let me move to Ms. Sajida again, talking about an important topic. Uh, where does efficiency lie in implementation of plans or plannings? Is it when the envoy is a foreign person to the country and we trust them, or we should assign someone from the same country, those who know the ins and outs of the country and know the environment, the context, what are the needs of this community, society, and know the history of this country and their needs? Everyone agrees that local people are the best to know their own country. In addition to what my colleague has just said, that planning is key for everything, even if international intervention or support is there, but it will be limited, providing expertise, creating platforms, creating or launching programs. But for the sustainability of any humanitarian or community projects, it must rely on the local community. I can tell you that at the heart of any humanitarian planning and its sustainability is to rely on local organizations, because a huge part of our work is humanitarian and responsive. So we work on the capabilities of the local communities so that they can actually continue the work. We are not talking about distributing the support or the reliefs, but in establishing organizations, local organizations that actually can manage such projects and can respond to similar scenarios, like for example rescue teams, response teams, training programs for the youth, like the programs that the UN and other organizations usually organize and plan. So we have a lot of Arab youth that are part of excellent programs like World Food programs and other programs. So we can see that building capabilities is important, not just to respond to local needs and crises, but to be experts to respond to the needs of the region at large. So it is as if we are creating a new generation of response. And I would like here to say that we are available everywhere. OCHA is available and is there in 60 plus countries. We have some partnership offices like the one that we have here in the UAE. We are here to actually create partnerships with local authorities, with our diplomatic institutions like Anwar Gargash, the Academy for Diplomacy, that works on knowledge building and capacity buildings for the next generation of government officials, ambassadors, etc. We also work side by side with university students and the youth in different schools. So this is the manpower or the task force that constitute the front line of response, whether at the level of policies or the relief and institutional level. Just to remind the audience that we will give the opportunity after a while for any interventions or questions, but I move to Ms. Olga. We know that through her career she has worked in the cinema industry, and here I would like to ask you a question that based on what you see from wars and coercion, politics, etc., if you were chosen to represent a cinematic work, would you have cinematic work based on real stories, or you would select stars that represent these situations?
You know, it's very difficult to see and hear in the news what's going on in our region here in the Arab states, but I would definitely choose a story from Gaza, or probably I would choose a story of untold story of Sudan. I would choose a story of a small girl who is abducted by rebels in Al Fashar who is abused, but miraculously she escapes her rebel's terrible situation, and through difficult route she ends up somewhere in Europe, in the Netherlands, and then she may become a writer, write her story. First, it would be leaked to one popular journalist, and then eventually she would write a book about herself. So that's the type of scenario I would work on.
هل ستقوم بتمويل هذا العمل السينمائي دكتور؟
Would you finance this work, cinematic work, Dr. Sajida and Dr. Khalid? Would you finance and fund this work? Of course.
أيضا أولغا إلى أي
And before Generation Z or the Gen Z, Olga, we have seen the crises and the all of these demonstrations in the countries. They managed to use the social media without even carrying weapons. To what extent do you see them as part of this in communicating the reality on the ground?
Well, definitely we like as UN volunteers engage the young generation for specific programs, such as we call it a verify program, that the information is correct. It was led by the UN Secretary General idea that it's important to engage the young generation to set up our own kind of streams of information. So the UN volunteers program is part of it.
No.
But beyond that, of course, the focus is on the young generation, because we, as colleagues said, we want to invest into sustainable future and in the power of the young population who will be here when we are not here.
نعم.
Yeah.
يعني تبقى للجلسة قرابة كما تشير الساعة 12 دقيقة وأنا
We are close to ending or closing this session. I would like to give the opportunity to the audience. I would give you a reminder. Ms. Olga is an expert in volunteering, and she has expertise, vast experience in this. And Dr. Khalid has an experience in response and recovery methods. And Dr. Muhammad is in modeling and the planning of applicable sustainability programs. So let's have the question from the gentleman here.
أنا
My name is Naman Nassan. I have a question to Dr. Olga, concerning volunteering. When we are talking about, in general, about volunteering in the countries with disasters like Syria, Gaza, and Lebanon. If we are looking at the other countries such as Turkey, when there was in 2023 an earthquake, so that before the arrival of any other entities, the country itself started with. How we are going to transfer this mechanism to help for recovery quickly?
The earthquakes in Turkey. So I can tell you that the local volunteers from the communities came up with some kind of app which could locate people under the rubble quickly. That was amazing. And that technology from the young generation actually is now available to other countries through the UNDP, United Nations Development Program. There is a South-South Cooperation Office there and a private sector collaboration office. I think through that collaboration we transfer available technology and make this knowledge available to other countries. So Turkey was a great example when volunteers just led and identified so many people in a short period of time, like 48 hours under the rubble, using this an app that was developed by the young generation volunteers.
جميل جدا. هذه معلومة أول مرة أعرفها. مين كمان بحب يسأل؟
And this is the first time I know this information. If you would like to talk about, please mention where do you work. Thank you so much for this discussion. My name is Dafira. I have a master degree from Manchester. Dissertation. I worked on the governance. Dr. Hadi, your discussion about the development. Okay, is it governance is the first, okay, or development is first? Okay, if we are looking for development in the communities, at the end of my thesis, after the analysis, and I discovered that analysis or governance is the main point. Or the foundation for from the stories, success stories that you have mentioned about the development after crisis, post crisis, is planning. Is it possible to know if there's a procedure or a guideline? What are the steps, okay, for UNDP to do or to start with when there's a catastrophe or disaster? What do you advise? What advice do you give to the governments? As Dr. Khalid Khalifa mentioned, so that he talked about, okay, that the first response from the country itself is an from your perspective. What is your advice to the government? My advice to the government to depend on fact based. If is it possible to depend on economic models, big data, data science, okay, to prepare, okay, prepare its programs in a scientific method. Let's take any country, for example. Okay, if for okay, when we have received $100 million to use it in farming, or just only or rebuilding. Okay, what I'm going to not a wishful thinking. If we are going to answer this question, we need to know how is the dynamics, okay, created by this sector, okay, to get benefit from $100 million. I advise, okay, okay, to prepare, okay, a clear plan, okay, with milestones to recovery and rebuilding. In fact, okay, the role of governance and transparency is really important. But okay, we have not to wait. Okay, time is really important. When we look at the international experiences, okay, so development brings governance, and governance brings development. So that improvements in growth, okay, improves the governance. Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Rola Maya, and I'm specialized in sustainability planning. I worked with ESCWA in rebuilding in Syria. I'm original Syrian, living in France since 15 years. Okay, in this case, what is the plan for rebuilding in Syria is, as UNDP or as partners? We people are looking for, okay, the security. If there's no security, no safety, okay, how those refugees will get back, return to Syria? So now, okay, like the University of Medina in Ajman. Now we are going to what we are discussing. What are the perception for security and safety? Okay, how to coordinate between all of these efforts. And thanks for the presence of your students as well, Dr. Khalid. It's really important question. We have different angles. Every one of these questions, the most concerning the return of the refugees, we are making surveys, okay, periodic surveys about asking the refugees about their desire to return to Syria. The most of those refugees say they are looking forward to return, but we don't know when. Okay, which timing is really important in this formula. In your point of view or experience, okay, some people say, okay, they would like to get back if he gets an job opportunity. If there's an opportunity for him to live, for example, to rebuild his home, his house. Some people they have legal issues, okay, concerning some papers in Syria. So that we need to prepare, so that you prepare clearance for him, security clearance for him, so that we have to talk about investment and providing a suitable environment to get them back, okay, to Syria, to return to the country. But the most important, we need to know when, okay, and how to provide them with what they need.
Raboel, I represent the Secretary General in the UAE, so very glad to have such competent colleagues in the panel, and thank you so much for the excellent facilitation. I just wanted to add a point, since data has been so much at the heart of the conversation and also the engagement of the communities. I think it's important to, reiterate, as my colleagues have said, that our role is to support the national authorities, but depending on the stage of the country, some institutions are stronger than others. You've got countries like the UAE who has a very strong institution for statistics and development, and also preparedness and response to emergencies. In other countries, it's not necessarily the case, and also the governance can be also weak. So whenever we actually fully understand that the communities are the one who know best about their needs and their priorities, there's also a lot of awareness that has to be taken into consideration about the politicization of aid, whether it is humanitarian, whether it is development. So the added value of having the UN or any recognized international organization is to make sure that it's apolitical, that it is really based on the needs, and it cannot be subject to discussion because it has to be justifiable, observable. So just to really reiterate that point, because I think it's important. You talked about corruption earlier, and we're there to support, but also to take as least lead as possible.
Sure. ساجدة، كونك تمثلي يعني أعمال
Jada, since you are representing for the coordination of UN in the United Arab Emirates, what feature, okay, is given to United Arab Emirates to adopt, okay, plans and programs? Of course, United Arab Emirates, like a supporting country, there's a clear vision, and we have a diplomatic power. So, okay, close to international organizations and be available in the corridors, in the presentations. As you know, United Arab Emirates is one of the donors, donating countries. As a third donating country after United States and European Union. So the result of this funding, they are present in a lot of pool funds which are affected by disasters, and they are available, okay, concerning what are the needs, okay, humanitarian needs and the response, so that they are able to provide assistance in a lot of countries when they need to interfere geopolitically, like for example like Gaza. Sometimes there were difficulties in delivering assistance because of the political obstructions, so that the exchange and even in COVID-19, how the economy increased the number of vaccines. So diplomacy not only a humanitarian work, it's a geopolitical, it's a health, also COP28, also concerning the climate, which opened the United Arab Emirates, opened the atmosphere for the humanitarian assistance and for him and specialized one day, okay, for humanitarian as a humanitarian day in and providing funding for a humanitarian issue. So 62 humanitarian representative and a lot of people are coming from different countries. Unfortunately, the time is limited. I'd like to thank our guests and the present my guests. I start Mrs. Olga Zobretskaya Devyatikina, Devyatikina, and she is regional manager of the United Emirates. Mrs. Sajid, the coordinator for UN in United Arab Emirates, Dr. Muhammad Al-Bashi, which is a consultant of strategic initiatives, and Dr. Khalid Khalifa, first representative of the commissioner of UNHCR in the Gulf region. And I'd like to thank the interpreters and everyone here. Thank you so much.